Well, federal government plans to reorganize food inspection in Vancouver could compromise the quality and safety of food products, so says the Public Service Alliance of Canada. Bob Jackson, the recently re-elected vice president for PSAC, he was elected at the region's BC convention last weekend, gives us comment.
Congratulations on being re-elected vice president.
No, thank you.
You just had this regional convention, right, for BC?
Correct. We're going into a very difficult period ahead of us. We've elected our new representatives for the region that are going to work very closely for the next 3 years on our regional council. So those folks are looking ahead to a very difficult road ahead with the upcoming rounds of collective bargaining that we're facing with our employer, various employers, in large part the Treasury Board, but there's also the agencies, and then there's other employers as well. So we know that it's going to be a difficult round. The government has certainly indicated their intentions to make it difficult for us to attain, any improvements in our collective agreements, and that's what our intent is going into this round, is to achieve what a fair collective agreement on behalf of our members and make improvements.
Do you have to negotiate with all these agencies separately?
Well, for the large groups, the large Treasury Board groups, we negotiate with them directly. With the agencies, it's sort of at arm's length. They say that, for example, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency seems to think of itself as at arm's length from the Treasury Board. However, when it comes time to do any negotiations, they don't make a move without talking to the Treasury Board. I think it's very clear that the Treasury Board, through their president, Mr. Clement, are certainly pulling the strings on negotiations.
And I guess it's fair to say the Tory government is looking always to cut back on the civil service.
Well, not only the civil service workers, but they're looking at cutting services to Canadians, and that's what's of real concern to us. We've seen many cuts over the last number of months, and they continue to do that. Most recently, I guess, this whole situation with Veterans Affairs and closing the offices across the country, the uproar that caused amongst the veterans community itself, and also with Canadians in general. I don't think it rings very well with Canadians when the government is out there treating the very people that it relies upon to defend our country and our democracy, and at the same time they treat them with the lack of respect by closing their offices where these individuals need to go and obtain service.
They did that, and they also introduced this lump sum payment for compensation, right, which I think considerably lowers the benefits.
Under the new Veterans Charter, that's not been received very well. They tried to do some backpedaling with creating this day for the veterans returning back from Afghanistan, and then that sort of blew up in their face, when the leak came out that the families were going to have to pay for it themselves to go to that event. And then they tried to cover themselves by saying, oh, no, we realized that it should be covered, and it came out, it was on last night's news that it's not even going to be the federal government that's paying for that. It's a volunteer organization. So it just, it's one thing after another.
One of the key things, I think, that's talking about reductions in services to Canadians is the Canadian Food Inspection branch here in Vancouver. What's happened there?
Well, basically the unit that has been functioning in this region, since the creation of the agency, that deals with consumer fraud and labeling verifications and verifications of ingredients and whatnot, that group is being disbanded, and the program is going to be changed significantly to the point where a lot of that work is not going to be done anymore. Now, it's being done in an interesting way because they're not necessarily eliminating positions, at least not at the moment. But they're trying to say that, well, everything's just fine. We'll still be doing verifications, and it's not exactly accurate. They're going to be doing some of the work that these folks do. To give an example, is to verify species of animals that are in ground meat, for instance, and that was part of our press conference that we held last week to highlight that. without doing a verification on species, it's very difficult to know when you pick up a package of ground meat. Does it contain pork? Does it contain beef? Does it contain chicken? Could be a combination of things depending on what a butcher might have available that day. So that's very concerning.
Is that kind of a common practice to do that sort of thing, to mix meats, as it were?
Well, I wouldn't want to say that it's common, but we know that it does happen because it has been identified in the past. There could be cross-contamination issues. They might be putting a whole pile of beef through a grinder, and then they might run pork through it, and then they might have some turkey left over, and they might try and grind that, and the possibility that stuff will get mixed up is always there. So the consumer going into the store to buy ground meat, and they think that they're getting ground beef. There may be religious issues, with pork and whatnot. And if there's pork in there, that's a big issue for them. Not to mention the fact that people have their own preferences, and they should be. I think in this country we should have a level of understanding that if you buy something in the store, you should be assured that what it says on the label is actually in there.
So what's happening with it? You say positions aren't being eliminated at this point, so what is happening?
Well, the unit that was working there, and that unit, when it was originally established, there was 11 people involved in that unit. Over the years, it's dwindled down to 4 individuals, and now that unit itself is, like I said, being disbanded, and they're going to be off doing different work within, the fair labeling program. But a lot of those projects that were done, where we would look at things like olive oil, for instance, and we would determine whether or not extra virgin olive oil is actually in the bottle of extra virgin olive oil, because olive oil it's a classic example of something that can be adulterated quite easily and can be substituted for lesser quality oils. And there's a whole wide variety of oils that can go in there, and if somebody's calling it extra virgin and charging a premium price for it, and nobody's verifying what's in there, that's a problem. And that's something that's quite common. So the unit that was assigned to do that work, they would be involved in the project planning, saying that they were going to do a survey at certain times of the year, and they're going to they would go out and they'd purchase a bunch of samples, and they do verification testing. That type of work is not being done anymore. It's only going to be done on a complaint basis. When it's on a complaint basis, who's going to be filing the complaint? If it's one manufacturer or a packager of this product against each other, you're setting yourself up for a situation where people are going to be, tattletaling on others and accusing others of this practice. If there's not the will of the Food Inspection Agency to take any actions with regard to prosecution, that's going to encourage, those individuals that are trying to play by the rules. They'll say, well, if my competitor is getting away with it, and why should I try and play by the rules? It's a bad situation.
Is this happening elsewhere in Canada as well?
It will be. Vancouver is at the pointy end of the stick, I guess, when it comes to this particular unit. I don't know whether it's being looked at as some sort of a pilot project by the agency, but they're looking for efficiencies all the time, and this is what they've come up with here. It's a very slippery slope when we start messing around with people's food. In this country, I think there's an expectation when you go to the store and you're laying your money down that somebody should be assuring that what you're paying for is actually what you're getting.
It's hard to believe, with the maple leaf tainted scandal and the scandal in one of the slaughter plants in Alberta, that this kind of thing goes on.
It never ceases to amaze me. Either you learn from lessons or you don't, and it seems to me that this particular agency is not learning from the mistakes that have been made, and sooner or later, something's going to happen, and it'll come back to bite them again.
Bob, thanks very much for this.
You bet. Anytime.
Okay.
Thanks, Dan.
Take care.
Bob Jackson is Regional Vice President for the Public Service Alliance of Canada. He spoke to us about changes to the food inspection program in Vancouver. I'm Dan Keaton, and the show is union made on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM.